G'day and welcome to GoldDerby's live post-mortem, post-Emmy show coverage. We're very excited. What did you guys think of the show?
I thought it was pretty good. I thought Jane Lynch was good. I thought her material wasn't as good. She had a few really good zingers. I think the highlight of the night was pretty much the line where she says, people are very curious why I'm a lesbian. Ladies and gentlemen, the cast of Entourage. So that was a highlight.
Well, the opening segment was very well produced. It went on a little too long, but she sang very well, and they brought a lot of stars in, and it had great throwaway moments, like speaking of Entourage, where they had what's his name, the five-time winner,
Ari Gold.
Yes, what's his name? Yeah, Jeremy Piven, right? Saying, "Oh, I'm not on TV anymore." And he did the line well, and it was very self-deprecating, but it was good. But a lot of people are criticizing the show today and yesterday, and I think they're wrong. I think it was a really good, strong show. I agree that with Daniel, some of the material wasn't that funny. The whole Emmy Tones ongoing gag was stupid. They should have thrown that out, and some of the jokes were just totally unfunny. But on balance, it was well staged, and it had energy, and I thought she had great confidence and presence on that stage.
We've got a bit of a talk here. Someone said, let's start talking about the winners. And someone's gone, Kyle Chandler, WTF. What do we think, guys?
That was the big jaw-dropper of the night. That's the one upset none of us saw coming. You know, we knew that Julie Bowen was in the mix, or that Guy Pearce could come in, or Maggie Smith, or Peter Dinklage wasn't in first place in our odds, but that they were contenders. And even though we all had Steve Carell out front, we knew Jim Parsons was close behind. But there were two things we did not see coming at all. And one was Kyle Chandler, and the other was the return of The Amazing Race. And on the Kyle Chandler thing, it was a head scratch. I have no explanation for it. Do you guys?
Not
Daniel,
a clue.
you can go first.
Okay, well, it's a winner that I actually would have supported based on his season as a whole. I think he had a really good year. I personally, he was my choice for the best actor of the season. But he just didn't, at all this season, he didn't have a really competitive, emotional single episode. And I'm really surprised that if they gave a farewell nod to anybody, they gave it to him and not Steve Carell.
I actually had Kyle Chandler in my second place slot. I thought he was the most likely to upset up until the Creative Arts Emmys, where Boardwalk Empire won all those awards. And I thought, I might be underestimating Boardwalk Empire a bit, and I moved Steve Buscemi up to second. The thing I thought that was really good about Kyle Chandler's tape is, first, it was quite a long tape. I think it was a longer episode of Friday Night Lights. He's in it a lot. And I think, and now obviously Steve Carell, this didn't work for, Martin Sheen, a lot of people this doesn't work for, but there is something about a final episode of a series, or your final episode, which reminds voters that this is your last chance to reward this character and this actor. And in perhaps especially for Kyle Chandler's case, where it's such a lovable, such a likable character, Coach Taylor is such a lovable guy, that perhaps that is what appealed voters to that particular tape.
I think that was the lesson we learned. I think that the lovability factor was what hurt Steve Carell, because Michael Scott is so creepy. And I think it's really what the secret ingredient was with the Melissa McCarthy thing, and that is, we forget that who's voting for these awards? Middle-aged people with weight problems. And who is she? A Midwest woman finally falling in love in this show. And I think that it's, when we talk about empathy, when we look back at Emmy wins like from Medium, what's her name?
Patricia Arquette.
Patricia Arquette, and we all analyzed that win that one year and said, how did that happen? The conclusion we came to was empathy. That her in her frumpy bathrobe and fluffy slippers, just sloshing around the house, is really all of us, and it connected so powerfully with voters. I think in that every man, or in this case every woman, way that, and she was so likable and just so lovable as a character, that I think we see that across the board.
Yeah, and I think with Kyle Chandler, like, he's great. He might not have the fireworks of John Hamm, but it's still a really impressive performance, that episode. Sort of the emotions under the layers, and the and it's just a really rich and deep performance, that episode. It's not a bad performance at all. It might not have the big shouting, crying scene that John Hamm had, but I don't think that necessarily makes best acting, and maybe this particular panel that they had this year responded more to the subtle acting than the showy acting that most panels usually respond to.
But there was a real Friday Night Lights thing happening at the Emmys,
Yeah.
and this was funny.
Yeah.
Let me tell you a little anecdote. About an hour or two before the Emmy started, Mike Asiello, one of our pundits, comes running up to me back in the press room. Is it too late? Is it too late to change my prediction from Mad Men to Saturday Night to Friday Night Lights? And I said, of course not, Mike. Well, we can make it change at GoldDerby. We can handle these kinds of things. So we made the change, and every time I would see Mike going by back, and we would see the wins for drama writing. Of course, it beat Mad Men, and then we see Kyle Chandler. It was starting to look as if Mike was onto something here. And afterwards, when I was talking with Matt Weiner, of course, the creator of Mad Men, he admitted he was scared because, look, that thing finally ended up winning Best Drama Series with only one other win this year. That was in hairstyling. So everybody was... if I could have changed my ballot by the end of the night, right before that last envelope was open, I would have changed to Friday Night Lights. It certainly looked like the momentum was going that way. So there was something there for the show, too.
Yeah, what did you think about that, Daniel, the Friday Night Lights wave?
I didn't really see that translating to Best Drama Series, because, I mean, I've seen that happen a lot before, where, the other categories go to other shows, and it starts to seem like momentum is going a certain way, but they don't vote as, like, a block, except for in the top category. So what you're seeing are really the whims of different panels. So they don't necessarily reflect what's going to happen in the top race. So I didn't really think Mad Men was in that much trouble.
I think we had a really interesting dynamic this year in the drama series race, and it was really exciting for Emmy watchers. We have Boardwalk Empire sweep the creative arts, win the most any show's ever won. They're looking pretty good coming off that. Then you go to the prime times, and then Friday Night Lights is surprising all over the place. You think, whoa, wait a second, we might have another front runner here. And then all of a sudden at the end, Mad Men wins that hasn't won only one hairstyling. And it was just a really, I found that really exciting, going through all those categories and sort of seeing the ebbs and flows of the different panels and stuff. It was really an exciting year, I think, in the drama categories.
Yeah, and you have to admit it to us all now, Matt, and that is you were counting the Emmy wins for Boardwalk all night for fear of the West Wing record being broken, right? I was.
Yeah, for sure. I was, very excited whenever Boardwalk didn't win something. and actually, before drama series, I went, oh, good, I think I'm pretty safe, because if any show beats Mad Men, it'll probably be Friday Night Lights now, not Boardwalk Empire.
God, it's funny how that goes, but it's very true.
Yeah, so no, great news for the West Wing on the weekend. Someone in the chat room says, I was rooting for Game of Thrones, but I knew it wouldn't happen. And I guess the great thing is Peter Dinklage was able to come through for Game of Thrones. I think we were all thinking, I think he was one of the three that was up there with a shot of winning, so it wasn't a shock, but I think less people were probably predicting him than the other two, so it was a sort of a nice little surprise. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I was talking with Chris Beecham last night, Boomer, and we were talking about Dinklage and how it went through. And the reason we were all putting him down a little lower, even though we all knew we had a good chance to win, was he doesn't really come into his scene in the episode submitted to the Emmy juries until about 20 minutes into the show. So the theory we were embracing falsely, because I think Beecham has set us straight here, is that would be a factor. When in fact, we know that if the judges are watching an episode of one candidate and supporting actor, and he's not in the first 20 minutes, they're zapping right through it, right to his scene. And then his scene comes, and it's this big, amazing, long, impressive scene. And suddenly, if you take out that factor of the delay, which might not be a delay, suddenly this win makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. Dan?
Yeah, I mean, and the fact that it's such a long scene too that he has in that episode probably helps too if they're fast forwarding through it, because if they're looking at other tapes and they're seeing a little scene here, a little scene there for John Slattery, for instance. I'm not sure how long his scenes are in that episode, but if they're like scanning through the episode and looking for the big scene, it's Peter Dinklage who gives it to them.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, no, that wasn't a huge surprise for me. Wasn't the one I predicted though. But yeah, no, I definitely think, and it was nice for Game of Thrones to get a big win on Emmy Day. That was really nice. Mm-hmm. Someone has just asked, talk about Julie's win. That's from whole WME. What do we think about that? Was we were not predicting this much at all. What do we think about the Julie Bowen win?
Good, Dan.
I'm not surprised. I had her ranked second behind Jane Lynch, because she had 2 good episodes of that show. I mean, Sofia Vergara basically threw the race to her with her submission, and Betty White had like one great scene with Mary Tyler Moore, but I'm not sure that episode or Betty White even was still going to resonate with them. And what we learned, I think, is that voters will not vote for a performance on Saturday Night Live unless it's in guest acting, because we thought it was her hosting performance on Kristen Wiig's tape that was going to win it for Jane Lynch, and they didn't go for it. So I wasn't surprised. I always thought Julie Bowen was very close second. So when they called her name, I thought it made sense.
Well, I think it was a surprise, because we thought that Jane Lynch was a lock here, because she had two people in this category had the double entry advantage. Julie Bowen had it because she gave a strong performance on Sofia Vergara's tape, as well, as Daniel said. So suddenly that usually translates into a win. It probably what was behind Jim Parsons winning for lead actors, because he appeared on Johnny Galecki's episode 2. Certainly almost everybody who had the double or multiple entry ended up winning here. So she had that, but in a bizarre way, Jane Lynch really, really had it, because, as Daniel just pointed out, she has this big comedic performance in Saturday Night Live. But she also had this, in terms of the range that the actors are looking for, the judges, she had the tearful, dramatic stuff on her own episode, where she deals with the death of her sister who had Down syndrome in the Glee episode she submitted. So my God, that's a whole fireworks display right there for voters. I couldn't believe that she lost, especially since she had proven to be a winner last year. So, wow, I was stunned.
Yeah, I think in hindsight, I'm finding this a much easier win to understand than perhaps I would have if before I was rating her chances before the Emmys. I think, if we've learnt a lesson, perhaps, from the Emmys this year, is comedic performances pay off. Jim Parsons had a very over-the-top comedic performance in both of his tapes. Melissa McCarthy, obviously a multicam comedy performance there too. She has overtaken cough medicine or something like that. You've got Phil Dunphy, obviously very funny guy. And Julie Bowen, who was just a straight-out comedy performance for 2 episodes, as opposed to Jane Lynch, who was all about her sister dying at the funeral, or Laura Linney, who was someone diagnosed with cancer.
Recently, yes, but when you look back at the category, historically, at least in the lead category, very often dramatic performances have won there.
Yeah, no, that's fair. Yeah, someone has said, I didn't laugh at all watching McCarthy's tape. That was a huge shock of the night. She was, if I was to put my 2 biggest shocks of the night, it'd probably be McCarthy and Barry Pepper for lead actor in a miniseries, but I don't know anything about miniseries.
Yeah, I was stunned by it, but it makes sense in retrospect. I really do think there's an empathy factor that also benefits Peter Dinklage. Look, we all root for the underdog, right? And she plays opposite to that, of course, in Bridesmaid with the nasty, mean performance that was. I just finally saw it a couple weeks ago. I caught up with the movie late on a plane flight, and it's brilliant. I think she's going to be Oscar nominated. So the fact that they checked off her ballot sometimes it's not about the performance on the tape and all these other things we look at. Sometimes it's they just really like somebody.
Gilmore Girls, she was on that for 7 years, and Samantha Who. So, I mean, she's probably had a lot of goodwill going her way for a while.